Thank you, Olga, and as she said, thanks to all of you. Our keynote speaker, Eerik Niiles Kross, is an Estonian diplomat and politician. In the 1980s, he was a prominent figure in the anti-Soviet resistance movement in Estonia while it was still under the Soviet Union. After independence, in 1991, he joined Estonia's foreign ministry, serving as head of intelligence from 1995 to 2000, as National Security Advisor to former President Lennart Meri in 2001. An observer of foreign affairs, Kross has published more than 100 articles on Russian foreign policy, NATO and Estonian-Russian relations. Kross is a well-known critic of the Russian foreign policy and the Russian head of state, Vladimir Putin. Eerik Niiles Kross, welcome to Pine Plains.
Well, almost every meeting nowadays starts with the unfortunate question, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
That's great. Dear Mark, dear Levi, dear Olga, and dear friends of Ukraine, I am truly honored for this opportunity to say a few words in support of the really wonderful effort by the charity, the Sunflower of Peace, to help Ukraine in this critical hour. And I'm sure some of you are already tired of hearing this phrase that it's the critical hour of the war today. We have heard it for 3 months now. But you know, it's true. It is the critical hour every hour until this war is won. So you have to bear with that. And I'm happy to see that so many of you are wanting to do something to help. I'm speaking to you from Estonia. You already heard about this country. It's up north there next to Russia, right? It's the northern one of the 3 Baltic states. And for very obvious reasons, Russia's invasion and aggression against Ukraine has really kept my country awake and mobilized, fully mobilized since it began. And we are a country of less than 1.5 million people, and in square mileage, just a bit larger than Denmark. We were occupied by the Russians for 50 years after World War II, and our grandparents experienced exactly the same kind of liberation by the Russians as Ukrainians have been experiencing now, for example, in Bucha or Mariupol. For context, over the last 1,000 years, the Russians have tried to invade us for 39 times. So I guess you can consider us sort of experts in this, right? So yes, it's not a surprise that my home country right now reacted and is reacting to the Ukrainian war as if we are the rear of the battle for the Ukrainians. We have received more than 40,000 Ukrainian war refugees. We have sent 8 times more military assistance to Ukraine than the Germans, 3 times more than the French, and we are by far the biggest donors per capita in the world. As said, this is not a surprise. If you know Estonians a bit, ask Levi, she will explain more. But enough of Estonia. What did surprise almost everyone, what surprised the governments of the Western world and what particularly surprised the Russians, is that not only Estonia or other Russian neighbors reacted almost the same way. Every democratic society in Europe, North America and beyond, reacted the same way. Well, we have all heard and repeated that Putin made a terrible miscalculation, underestimating the Ukrainians, and yes, that is true. Ukrainians' heroic defense of their homeland, of their freedom, touched a nerve in all of the free world. And it has not only glued us all to TV screens and Twitter feeds for the last 102 days, it has caused and triggered a global popular movement to support Ukraine. And I'm very happy that you are now part of that movement. Putin, by the way, calculated correctly that he can sell his war to his own people, or if they don't listen, he can force it down their throats and make them listen. He calculated correctly that if he wins quickly, the Western governments will negotiate on expense of Ukraine. Unfortunately, this is true as well. Remember the first night in Europe, it was the early morning of February the 24th when the war began. President Biden's first message. He said he will consult the allies next morning, there will be a response, and there will be sanctions. There was no mention of military assistance. And he said, my prayers are with Ukraine. Think of this, just prayers, no thoughts. The expectation at that moment was that there is nothing more to think about, only pray. Well, the world owes Ukraine, and I'm not exaggerating, the world owes Ukraine immeasurably, historically, and forever, because Ukraine chose to fight, chose to stand up, and not let the dictator dictate the course of history. And the democratic societies woke up to that. Well, it's of course possible that President Biden's prayers helped, but I tend to think there are two factors more important that have helped the world: Ukrainian people and the people of the democratic societies. There is namely one thing that the Western governments are more afraid than aggressive dictators, and that is their own voters. Over the last few months, the European societies have radically changed the policies of their governments. Finland and Sweden are joining NATO and helping Ukraine militarily. The last time Sweden helped a country in war was 1939. Germany has started to give Ukraine weapons. And even if it's still a bit scary to someone whose father spent time in a German concentration camp, it's a huge change. Spanish taxi drivers drive to the Polish-Ukrainian border to pick up refugees and bring them to Spain. Irish fishermen call their parish priests, demanding that their Catholic church bring in Orthodox Ukrainians and send them help. And believe me, the Irish fishermen are not the most sentimental bunch around. And finally, you, Americans. From where I sit, it looks like the Ukrainians have finally given you something that almost all of you can agree about for the first time since September 11. Think of Putin as of Osama bin Laden with nukes. Let this sink in and you have all the answers you need about this war. There are fierce battles raging right now in Izium, near Kherson, and most importantly in Severodonetsk, all the places no one of us had even heard about 4 months ago. But for those of you who follow the war more closely, I have good news. Over the last 2 days, the Ukrainian forces have almost entirely taken back all of Severodonetsk from the Russians. 3 days ago, just after a week of relatively small Russian successes, half of the Twitter world and several governments were saying again that the Ukrainians are losing the war. There is still far too much disbelief and defeatism among us. There is too much fear. The Ukrainians are not afraid. The Estonians are not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. And most importantly, don't let your government be afraid. I mean, some of our leaders are still talking about not escalating and not starting a World War III. And by all costs not to, lure America into the conflict. Seriously? Does anyone really think that Russia, that just struggled for 3 weeks to take the village of Popasna, population 17,000, from the Ukrainians, would next like to confront the US militarily in a global conflict? What the Ukrainians need most right now is to feel that the world is with them. Of course, they need weapons. Of course, they need all assistance they can get. But most of all, they need to know that we will not tire, we will not ask for concessions, we will not push them to give away territory, we will not push them into a deal with Putin. Yes, they need peace, but they cannot have peace before they win, which means all we need to do is help them win. So I hope that you will be generous today at the auction. Every medical kit, every helmet, every dollar helps Ukraine and helps the world. But after you write your check, enjoy the party, after you thank Mark and Levi and Olga for this wonderful event, and go home, write your congressman, write your senator, write your local and state governments and ask what more they can do to support Ukraine and welcome Ukrainians. Write the White House, let them know support for Ukraine is essential. And make sure that they know that their voters think Ukraine has to win. And that you keep your eye on what they do about it. This is how democracy wins. Thank you very much. Please raise a glass today with the old Ukrainian soldiers' toast for your and for our freedom. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Eerik. I'm not sure you can hear the applause in the hall, but there is a tremendous rouse of applause, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Suur tänu. Edasi.